In 2018, the FBI killed the only person that they spend so much time training to protect, the hostage.
Law enforcement agents were attempting to rescue Ulises Valladares, who was kidnapped from his Conroe home and held for ransom.
If this is your first time on the channel, I'd like to prepare you for what you're about to experience before I get into the details. If you're in love with organizations or people and can't think critically, then I guess I look like the villain here. You can't point out that they entered a room and didn't check a corner, and if you do, you're somehow the bad guy who doesn't know anything. You know what? Let's run that back. Let's get a different camera angle. Let's make sure we check that corner this time. Target in the same place, camera in a different place. You get the idea. These two clips are pretty good examples of theater and not great examples of capabilities. Yes, I think they're awesome. Yes, I think they have the highest level of CQB skills on the policing side, but I also know it's way easier to demonstrate greatness in a sterile training environment. I also know that when teams fail miserably, they usually do their best to hide it. Like a Navy SEAL said in the book Code Over Country, the bigger the up, the greater the award.
These were supposed to be the good guys. They're supposed to have the training. They're supposed to have the backing to know how to handle circumstances like this.
There's way more men out there that present themselves like they're accountable than there is men actually taking accountability. I often look deeper into critical incidents than most people would, and oftentimes the facts I find lead to a discovery of failures. I get it. These are tough conversations, especially if you're the one who made the mistake or a poor decision. I've made plenty of those myself. Some of you like that and understand what's going on here, and then new people come along and they get all emotional in my comment section because they're fanboys of the culture instead of the information. I mean, people in this space create videos around these topics and just lie to you guys. And you're like, man, I love this. Lie to me more. Give me more lies. Please set my expectations unreasonably high. It's like being great at one thing somehow makes you a master at everything. When's the last time any of these people made a video and said, hey guys, I f***ed up, don't do this? Instead, you just constantly hear stories of heroism, some of which aren't even true. Now, I'm not saying heroic acts don't exist, of course they do, but if it sounds like Hollywood, it's probably Hollywood. Sometimes you have to look past the fame they've created for themselves. I mean, dudes get arrested twice, and you guys are like, we love you, we have your back. It's like when women fall in love with serial killers after they're convicted and sitting in prison. It's just weird. Anyways, how could the most elite police unit, who probably spends the most time actually training hostage rescue, commit the ultimate sin by killing only the hostage? The short answer is because no one is really as elite as you or they make themselves out to be. Like I said, at the end of the day, everyone is capable of making a mistake. Like when a Navy SEAL threw a grenade on a hostage rescue, killing Dr. Norgrove, who was the hostage. The long answer calls for a little bit more than surface level investigating or taking people's word for it, because the FBI doesn't wear body cams. There are no press conferences, and they don't have to provide answers to anyone. In instances where the local police department gets in a shooting and it immediately becomes public record, I'm sure the FBI's records are classified for no reason, if they even exist at all. 7 years later in 2025, we have more or less the truth. I'm going to start by giving you the initial reports from the media and law enforcement before we get into what we can call the final findings.
During that rescue attempt, an agent shot and killed Valladares. Court records show the agent claimed Valladares grabbed his firearm.
Once the FBI started making the entry, two agents were at the back of the house where the victim, the kidnapping victim, was believed to be. They started breaching the window to the room where the victim was located with one agent with a breaching tool, a breaching bar that was actually trying to break into the window so they can get inside. It's important for the community to know that the lighting conditions inside that room, it was dark. There was no lighting inside the room. The agents in the back of the house that were actually breaching that window did not use any lights because they were concerned that as the entry team came in through the front of the house, they wanted to make sure that they did not inadvertently blind that entry team. So they made a tactical decision not to use lights. So the lighting conditions were extremely poor at this time, a little after 3:30 a.m. As the one agent was breaching the window, unfortunately, he lost control of the breaching tool and it fell inside the resident. At that point, the agent that actually ended up discharging his M4 rifle started using his rifle to try to continue to breach the window. Tragically and sadly, Mr. Valladares was right by that window, and he was bound, and obviously with his hands in front of him, taped and not able to see in the dark himself. He actually grabbed the rifles, what our investigation is showing so far, and started to pull at the rifle.
Something to make note of here is that this briefing was early on in the investigation, and more than likely the information being provided here is information that the FBI gave to the PD because there's no way that the PD could have known some of this information otherwise, which means some of this information is inaccurate, including it being completely dark inside the room or the window being breached on the back side of the house. I'll go over more of that shortly. I'm also willing to bet that the FBI operators had on night vision goggles or nods, whatever terminology you want to use. Could this be a case of nods making it that much more difficult to clearly identify? I guess we'll never know for sure.
While he was pulling on it and the agent was trying to control the rifle, at one point the agent felt like he was going to lose control of his rifle. The M4 would end up inside the residence, not knowing who was pulling at that rifle, and was in fear that if he lost control of his rifle, the individual pulling on the rifle may use that rifle weapon against the entry team that was coming in from the other end.
Immediately, when I heard this information back in 2018, I thought, well, that didn't happen. Does that even sound reasonable to you? Imagine you're bound, blindfolded, you're a hostage, and then you hear a window breaking. Do you think your first instinct is to go over to the window and start grabbing at the window where you're more than likely going to cut yourself? It just kind of sounds ridiculous, right?
When he felt he was starting to lose control, he intentionally discharged his rifle, striking Mr. Valladares once. He fired a second shot that missed and actually ended up in the eaves of the rooftop.
Now, there's three major issues with what happened here. Two of them are obvious, and the third one you probably didn't think about. The first issue is the agent losing the breaching tool inside the residence. Now, in the final report that I'm going to read you, they say that the breaching tool is a Halligan, and I almost don't want to believe that that's true because I imagine if anybody has options in breaching equipment, it's probably the FBI. And a Halligan definitely wouldn't be my first choice or the first choice of anybody I know to breach a residential window. The first reason being that they're just heavy. And as you're swinging a Halligan, it becomes increasingly more difficult for you to control, especially once the tool extends beyond the threshold of the window itself. Secondly, the shorter the tool, the closer I have to stand to the window, the more I am exposed to potential threats inside, which is obviously very bad, and we want to try to mitigate that. And lastly, the closer I am to the window as I'm breaching it, the more likely I'm going to end up hitting my hands on the threshold itself and maybe injuring myself, or maybe even worse, breaking the glass and overextending and then cutting my hands or wrists on the glass, which is something you obviously want to avoid. Whenever possible, you want to utilize something to breach a window that's going to give you some more standoff from the window so that you can mitigate some of those issues. I'll put some breaching tools up on the screen for you. This is not one of those tools. I'm just using this as an example. I would use this for other things, not breaching windows because it's too flimsy and it would break, but just to demonstrate, I would want to stand back away from the window as far as I can, where I can still breach the window. Maybe if I'm doing it this way, I can have somebody with a shield in front of me, or I can have my cover guy in front of me. But the farther I am away from the window as I'm breaching it, the less exposed I am to potential threats inside. And obviously, I'm not going to injure myself by hitting my hands on the threshold of the window or the glass itself. The second and more obvious issue is that that operator or FBI agent shot at a threat that he didn't clearly identify. Now, the PD reported that there was no lights on inside, but then he also didn't use white light. So if it's dark inside and we're not using white light, then we probably have our nods on. That would make more sense as to why they said they didn't want to use white light to blind the team that was coming through the door. So he either A, couldn't see at all because it was dark, or B, had nods on. It made it more difficult for him to clearly identify the threat, and obviously he shot at a no-shoot. And lastly, the third issue that you probably didn't think about is think about from a difficulty perspective that you have a perceived threat standing about 3 feet in front of you, his hands are bound, he's blindfolded, and you only hit him once out of the 2 rounds that you fired. So one round hits him, the other round goes into the ceiling. So is that a marksmanship problem? Is that a shooting too fast problem? But I just kind of find it a little bit silly that he's shooting 2 rounds at a target that should be easy to hit, and he actually missed with one of those rounds. 7 years later, and the only reason we have answers now is because the family won a civil lawsuit for about $2 million, and through those civil proceedings, we get details about the hostage rescue itself. Agent Hawkins was tasked with porting or breaking out a double-pane window to the room where the FBI learned the hostage was being held. Agent Lapp was responsible for providing cover for Agent Hawkins as he ported the window. Agent Lapp therefore took a position adjacent to the exterior of the house, permitting him to have an angle from a side of the window that was to be ported out of view from inside the room. Another team was tasked with breaching the front door to the house, entering the residence, and rescuing the hostage. Neither Agent Hawkins nor Agent Lapp was tasked with providing cover for the team that breached the front door. Now, what that statement says is that those agents' responsibility was to simply port the window or breach the window for the purposes of causing a distraction. When they say that the one agent was covering the other agent, they just mean that he was covering him as he was breaching and not supposed to be covering down inside in terms of one of the main reasons why we might port a window on a warrant. One of those main reasons is to port and cover down inside, so a port and cover. And the other reason that we would breach or port a window on a warrant is to cause a distraction, which is apparently what their job was. So the fact that they were even engaging inside kind of could be seen as problematic because that's not what their role was. But you could make the argument while he was breaching, the other agent's life was in danger and so he was there, etc. But the point is that if our goal is simply to cause a distraction, there's a number of different ways to do that without anybody really being exposed to the window at all. Again, if we have the right breaching tool, and we can get some standoff from the window. I mean, I could stand almost 90 degrees to the window, and there's no precision about this. I don't need to clear the blinds. I'm simply making a bunch of noise, breaking the window, and staying out of the way of any threats that may be looking outside, and that's all that's required. I have even used projectiles, things you find on the ground, to cause a distraction, to break a window. You gotta be careful when you do that because you don't want it to go too far inside. But the goal when you're causing a distraction is to simply make a lot of noise, not to cover down inside. For whatever reason, according to this, they didn't want those agents firing inside or in a position to fire inside, probably because the agents that on the primary entry were within close proximity to the room where they figured the hostage was being held, and they did not want there to be some sort of conflict. Upon hearing the command to breach, Agent Hawkins was to port both panes in the window and move out of the way. He had been given and provided a Halligan tool for that purpose. When the command was given, he struck the first pane but lost control of the tool as it dropped through the broken pane and into the house. Agent Hawkins, nevertheless, moved away quickly past the window as Agent Lapp focused on any visible or threatening movement in the room. As Agent Hawkins moved past the window, he stated that he looked back and saw the silhouette of a person through the window. At or about the same time, Agent Lapp fired 2 rounds through the window, hitting the silhouette in his left side. The person shot fell backwards on the floor where he immediately died. Agent Hawkins stated that he did not see Agent Lapp shoot through the window and did not know where any gunshots had come from. Agent Hawkins, in both his statements and deposition, stated that after the command was given, he ported the window and he moved out of the way, but looked back at some point to see a person leaning out of the window. He testified that Agent Lapp told him that the same person grabbed his weapon as he fired it. However, Agent Hawkins did not testify that he witnessed the discharge of Agent Lapp's weapon, but he heard Agent Lapp state later, "I shot him as he grabbed my gun." An examination of the hostage's hands and body revealed that he was never in contact with Agent Lapp's weapon. A review of a photograph of the window and considering the speed at which the events develop does not square with Agent Hawkins or Lapp's statement. The hostage was either standing on the couch or behind the couch at the time he was shot. Neither of these positions nor the size of the opening in the window permitted the hostage to extend himself out the window. Equally, the evidence reveals that he was still blindfolded and could not see the agents. Heath laid on a bed across her room away from the hostage near a small lamp that was on the dresser. Heath is a female, I guess we could call her a hostage taker, although she was never charged with kidnapping. She was inside the room with the hostage. The hostage was placed on the couch that was situated beneath the window that Agent Hawkins would later port. At all times, the hostage's back was to the window. He did not leave the couch until he heard the noise on the roof and shouting. When Agent Hawkins broke the window, awakening Heath as she lay on her bed, she raised up in the bed to see the hostage rising to his feet from the couch and turned toward the window as the glass and tool fell into the room. So that was the statements of the agents, what they say happened, and the witness inside the room. And this is going to be essentially the proceedings' final legal findings. Agent Lapp's role in the rescue operation was to provide cover from Agent Hawkins, as Agent Hawkins was to port the 2 panes of a single window outside the room where he and Hawkins were assigned. The window was the window nearest the front of the house, so not the window on the back side of the house. And actually, if you look at this photo here, this is the front door here, and then over here down the street, there's a side view of this broken window or a window that's been boarded up. This is probably the window that they were breaching. Agents Hawking and Lapp were to create a distraction as the rescue team breached the front door and rushed into the room where the hostage and kidnapper were located. From the activities of all agents involved, it is reasonable to infer that the court does not find from the evidence that the rescue team, including Agent Hawkins and Lapp, assumed that the hostage was located in or near the room where the window was to be ported. Within seconds of the agreed signal and a breach of the front door by the rescue team, the hostage was shot before the rescue team entered the bedroom where the hostage was being held. At the time of the signal and during the porting of the window, Agent Lapp and Hawkins were able to see a silhouette immediately appear through the window as the hostage rose from the couch. The hostage immediately turned toward the window under which the couch was stationed. When the hostage turned his body and attention to the window, he was immediately shot by Agent Lapp. The slug entered the dorsal left arm, located 8 inches below the apex of the left shoulder. The slug traveled diagonally, left to right, front to back, exiting through the right side of the hostage's back. Neither Agent Hawkins nor Agent Lapp could be seen by the hostage because he remained blindfolded and there was no light outside that side of the house that exposed the agents. Moreover, the lamp in the room where the hostage was being held illuminated that room. Hence, the lamp served as a blind, preventing the hostage from seeing through the window. And this would have also made it easier for the agents to actually see inside. Contrary to any statements or reports or remarks by Agent Hawkins or Lapp, there is no evidence to suggest that the hostage leaned out of the window, was able to see either agent, pointed his hands through the window toward either agent, grabbed Agent Lapp's weapon, or in any manner threatened the safety of agents. Statements made by the agents otherwise are not only untrue and unsupported by scientific evidence or logic, they represent intentional falsehoods. Moreover, the autopsy report establishes that Agent Lapp and or Hawkins' statements regarding the position of the hostage when they were shot are untrue and fabricated. The number one problem here and takeaway from this is obviously making the decision to shoot a no-shoot. You can't shoot at what you can't see, and if you can't clearly identify that what you're looking at is a threat, you probably shouldn't take that shot because the alternative can be very bad. But I do want to explore and speculate a possibility that contributed to him engaging somebody that he should not have, because I have a similar experience that compares to this in training where I learned a valuable lesson. So my guess is that they had nods on, they moved to the side of the house, they breached the window, and as soon as they breached the window, the agent that was covering inside got hit under nods by the light inside, which, you know, made it more difficult for him to see. I don't want to go as far as say blinding him, but it made it more difficult for him to see. And like I said, he shouldn't have shot right at that point. But something similar happened to me in training where we were clearing an apartment. There wasn't an apartment, it was actually an office building. We were in the hallway. Me and another guy took a room off one side of the hallway and we were under nods, and it was, you know, dark pretty much with a little bit of light coming in here and there. And we were clearing another room inside the room that we had just cleared off of the hallway. And I didn't have enough training at the time. I didn't have enough experience. And I should have recognized that the door that we were about to open, it was going to be fully lit because it was on the outside of the building. It was the daytime. And I should have recognized the light coming underneath the door, which would have told me at the time, hey, you know, look underneath your nods, like for this moment here. And when that door came open, I didn't do that. And as I kind of squared up with the door, I was presented with 2 figures standing, you know, hostage taker type scenario, and I couldn't see. I mean, I just saw 2 figures standing there. I couldn't for sure 100%, you know, say that this is the bad guy and this is the good guy. I could have taken a pretty good guess, but being wrong in training is also really bad. There can be repercussions for that. And so I had to basically step off and pull back, and more experienced officer stepped up and he did exactly what he should have done, and he took care of it. And that was a valuable lesson that I learned, you know, under nods, is like paying attention to the environment and being able to see these indicators. I'm not saying they could have done that here, probably not, but that could have been a factor that contributed to him, you know, engaging this person. If you've made it this far in the video, then it's a miracle. You should consider subscribing to the channel, because you know that YouTube is probably just going to recommend my stuff to you anyways. And more importantly, what really helps out the channel is that when I post a video, usually on Sundays, you guys show up and watch that video. That's really what you can do to help out the channel. And if you'd like, you can feed the algorithm down below.